Welcome to Stories Junction. Let's begin today's story. For the first 8 years, Clara and I were inseparable. Married for 5 of those, everything seemed perfect. We traveled to new places, spent long nights talking about everything under the sun, and planned our future together. But like any relationship, it changed. The shift wasn't dramatic, but it was there, creeping in slowly. It wasn't until about a year ago that I noticed things weren't as they once were. She started complaining more, not about me specifically, but about her life. It was as if everything was suddenly dull to her. She wanted more excitement, more thrill. I found myself wondering, had we gotten too comfortable? Was stability now a curse? I worked hard. I had a good job in real estate, making sure we lived comfortably. There was no financial worry, and we had the freedom to do whatever we wanted. But it wasn't enough for Clara. It wasn't even close. And then there was Grace. I never trusted her. From the first time I met her, something about her rubbed me the wrong way. Grace was one of those people who thrived on chaos. She was always in the middle of drama, always had some scandalous story to share. I'd heard all the rumors about her, how she ruined relationships, how she left destruction in her wake. And Clara thought I was just being judgmental. You need to relax, Mark. Grace is just fun, she'd tell me whenever I expressed my concerns. But every time I left for a business trip, there she was. Every single time. It wasn't subtle. When I came home after a trip, there would be signs. A faint smell of alcohol, perfume on the couch, empty glasses scattered around, and sometimes even a pair of shoes that didn't belong to Clara. I confronted her about it once. Why is Grace always here when I'm gone? I asked. Clara just shrugged, laughing. She's a friend, Mark. What's the problem? You don't want me to have any fun? But it wasn't about her having fun. It was about who she was spending her time with. I tried to convince myself I was just being paranoid. Maybe I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. One evening, after returning from a 3-day trip to Miami, I pulled into the driveway, exhausted and ready to be home. The first thing that caught my eye was the trash, overflowing, bottles and plastic cups spilling out. That wasn't like Clara. She was meticulous about keeping the place tidy. As I approached the door, my retired neighbor, Jack, waved me over. Jack was the kind of guy who kept an eye on everything around the block. He knew when the paperboy came, when the mailman showed up, and anything else happening in our neighborhood. Got a second? He called. I walked over, a feeling of unease growing in my stomach. Sure, Jack. What's up? He hesitated, rubbing his chin before finally saying, I wasn't going to say anything, but I thought you should know. I felt the pit in my stomach tighten. Jack didn't usually speak like this. What is it? Well, while you were gone, Jack began, lowering his voice. Clara had some kind of party. Lots of people coming and going. Couples. Not just one or two. A lot. I frowned. What do you mean, couples? Like a normal party? Jack shifted uncomfortably. No, Mark. Not like a normal party. There were men and women, people I didn't recognize. Some of them looked like they were more than friends. My heart began to race. It couldn't be. Are you sure it was my house? Jack nodded. Yeah, I saw them, different people, in and out. I didn't think much of it, but I figured you'd want to know. I thanked him, but my mind was spinning. What was going on while I was away? I walked back into the house, the unease growing with each step. The place felt off. It wasn't the usual scent of Clara's perfume or the candles she loved. This was something different, something darker. The air was thick with the smell of alcohol and something I couldn't place. Sweat, maybe? The living room had been wiped down, but it felt too clean, like someone had been trying to cover something up. I found Clara in the kitchen, sipping a glass of wine, looking too comfortable. Hey, you're back, she said, smiling as if nothing was out of place. How was the trip? I studied her, trying to read her. She was acting normal. Too normal. It was fine. Long flight, boring meetings. What about you? What did you do while I was gone? Clara shrugged. Nothing much. Just hung out with Grace. Went to dinner. Watched some shows. She didn't mention the party. Not once. My pulse quickened. Why leave that out if it was just a casual gathering? I knew she was lying. But why? And what exactly was she hiding? That night, as Clara drifted into sleep, I couldn't just let it go. I needed answers. She always kept her phone under the pillow when she slept, and I knew she wasn't a deep sleeper. I had to be careful. I lay there for what felt like hours, listening to her steady breathing. When I was sure she was out cold, I slid her phone out from under the pillow, holding my breath as I unlocked it. But when I opened her messages, nothing. No strange texts, no missed calls, no hints of anything suspicious. Everything was clean, too clean. I checked her photos, her social media accounts, even the deleted messages folder. Nothing. She was either incredibly careful, or she was deleting everything. I put the phone back and stared at the ceiling for the rest of the night, a sinking feeling gnawing at my gut. But I didn't have proof. Not yet. The next few days passed in a blur. I went through the motions of our everyday life, pretending nothing was different, but inside, I was on edge. Every word Clara said, every action she took, felt like a lie. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening behind the scenes, something I wasn't supposed to know about. That Friday, Clara went out to brunch with Grace. I told her I had some work to catch up on, which was true, but I had something else in mind. As soon as she left, I got to work. I couldn't shake the thought that if there was something happening, I had to see it for myself. I wasn't going to sit by idly while my marriage crumbled beneath me. I ordered small, high-definition hidden cameras. I wasn't proud of it, but I needed the truth. I installed them in the living room, the kitchen, and, most importantly, our bedroom. I placed them carefully, making sure they were well hidden, but still captured everything. I even put one behind a decorative plant in the bedroom, right where Clara usually spent her time getting ready. If something was going on, I was going to find out. A week later, I had another business trip. This time, it was a short conference in Dallas. I packed my suitcase like usual, slipping on my suit and grabbing my laptop bag. As I walked to the door, I glanced back at Clara. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. No reaction, no sadness, no concern. Just another day. I'll be back in 3 days, I said, trying to sound casual. Okay, she replied, barely looking up. That was it. Not a single question about how the trip would go or when I'd be back. I wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or betrayed by the lack of emotion in her voice. She didn't even care anymore. I drove to the airport, parked my car in the long-term lot, and waited. Not for my flight, but for the footage to start coming through. I checked into the hotel in Dallas, set up my computer, and logged into the camera system. The first night, everything seemed fine. Clara followed her usual routine. She made herself dinner, sat down to watch TV, and had a glass of wine. No visitors, no Grace, no signs of anything suspicious. I started to wonder if I was just overthinking it all. Maybe I had been wrong. Maybe Jack had been mistaken, or maybe I was letting my mind play tricks on me. But as the second night came, everything changed. It started innocently enough, too innocently. Clara and Grace were in the living room, setting up candles and dimming the lights. Music played softly in the background, creating an almost intimate atmosphere. I leaned forward in my chair, staring at the screen as I watched them line up bottles of alcohol, whiskey, vodka, wine, far more than 2 people could drink in a single evening. It was as if they were preparing for something bigger, something I wasn't supposed to see. Then, the guests arrived. Not just a few friends, couples. I recognized a few of them, people from the neighborhood, but most of them were strangers. I watched in stunned silence as they filed into our home, laughing, talking, and bringing more bottles of liquor with them. The living room filled with people, and as the night went on, the atmosphere became more and more charged. There was flirting, whispered conversations, and an undeniable sense of closeness that felt wrong. And then it happened. Clara was in the middle of it all, laughing, talking, flirting. She was drunk, clearly, but it wasn't just the alcohol. She was enjoying herself. Too much. Her eyes were bright, her movements fluid, as she locked eyes with one of the men, a tall, muscular guy I'd never seen before. I held my breath, watching the screen as Clara leaned in and kissed him. I felt my heart drop. She kissed him again, then another man. My mind couldn't process it fast enough. The images blurred together as Clara moved through the crowd, clearly at the center of it all. She was laughing, she was drinking, and then she grabbed the tall man's hand and led him upstairs. I couldn't breathe. I stared at the screen, watching as they ascended the stairs to our bedroom. Our bedroom. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I thought I might pass out. But I couldn't look away. I fast-forwarded through the footage, trying to keep my composure. I watched as more couples paired off, some on the couch, some disappearing down the hallway. But Clara? She was everywhere. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was orchestrating this madness. My fists clenched involuntarily. My jaw ached from grinding my teeth. But I didn't react. Not yet. I spent the next few days pretending everything was fine. I couldn't confront her yet. I had to gather more evidence. I had to be sure of what was going on before I made my next move. The truth hurt more than I was ready for, but I knew I couldn't live with this uncertainty any longer. The next time I left for a trip, I wasn't going far. I told Clara I was going to New York for 3 days. This time, I wasn't heading to a hotel. I checked into one across town, watching her from a distance. The night came, and just as I suspected, the party started again. More couples, more alcohol, more chaos. Grace was there, of course, draped all over some guy before even stepping inside. But this time, I wasn't going to just sit back and watch. I wasn't going to be the fool anymore. I waited until the party was in full swing. The music was blasting, people were laughing, and the alcohol was flowing freely. And then I left. I drove home, knowing what I would find. When I pulled into the driveway, my stomach turned. The house was overrun. Cars filled the front lawn, and the street was lined with vehicles. The scene in front of me was almost unrecognizable. This was no longer my home. I didn't hesitate. I walked straight to the front door and pushed it open. The music was deafening, the air thick with the smell of alcohol and sweat. There were strangers everywhere, some too close on the couch, others whispering in dark corners, slipping away into the different rooms. A couple froze when they saw me standing there. They didn't even know who I was. I scanned the room, looking for Clara, and then I heard her voice. She was in our bedroom. My heart pounded in my chest as I moved toward the stairs, the music thumping in my ears like a constant drumbeat. Each step felt heavier, like the weight of what I was about to see was pressing down on me. My mind was racing, but my feet kept moving, carrying me upstairs toward our bedroom. As I approached, I heard their voices. Low murmurs, the occasional laugh, but it was clear there was something intimate happening inside. I pulled out my phone, already recording. I couldn't believe what was about to unfold, but I needed proof. Solid, irrefutable proof of what Clara had been doing behind my back. The door to our bedroom was slightly ajar, and I could see shadows moving inside. Without a second thought, I pushed it open. The scene that greeted me was one I'll never forget. Clara was there, my wife, the woman I had shared 8 years of my life with, sitting in our bed with a stranger. A man I didn't recognize, one of the many I had seen earlier at the party, now with his hands on Clara, kissing her like she was his. She didn't even hear me come in at first. It wasn't until I spoke that they both froze. "Enjoying yourself?" I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. The guy scrambled to grab the sheets, his eyes wide with panic. "What the?" Clara's face drained of color, her eyes widening as she turned to look at me. Her mouth opened and closed as if she were trying to say something, but no words came out. I held up my phone, pointing it at her. "Smile, Clara. You're on camera." She immediately grabbed the sheets to cover herself, but it was too late. The damage was done. I had seen everything, more than I had ever wanted to. "Mark, I can explain," she started, her voice trembling. I let out a dry laugh, the sound almost mocking. "Oh, I bet you can, but you don't need to. I saw everything, every single thing." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. "Almost. Please, Mark, just—" "No." I cut her off. "I trusted you. I loved you. And this is what you do when I'm not around." The guy, still trying to pull on his pants, held his hands up in surrender. "Man, I swear I didn't know she was married." I turned to him, my voice icy. "I don't care who you are. Get out." He didn't argue. Without saying another word, he grabbed his clothes and bolted past me, leaving the room as quickly as possible. I stood there, staring at Clara, my heart a mix of rage and disbelief. She reached for me, desperate, her face a picture of regret and fear. "Baby, please, let's talk about this." I shook my head. "We're done talking." I turned away, heading for the door. "No, Mark, please," she cried out as I walked out of the room, leaving her alone in the mess she had created. I didn't look back. The drive back to my car felt surreal, like I was moving through a dream. My hands gripped the wheel, so tightly my knuckles turned white. I had just caught my wife in the act of betraying me, and yet I felt strangely numb. The adrenaline of confronting her hadn't worn off, but I wasn't sure how I was supposed to feel. Part of me wanted to scream, to destroy everything in my path. But the other part, the part that was still holding on to the remnants of what we once had, was too tired to care. When I got to my car, I dialed the only number I needed to. Clara called me a few times after that, but I didn't answer. I didn't have to hear her excuses. I didn't need her apologies. She had made her choices, and I was done. The next day, I filed for divorce. No second chances. No going back. I didn't care about the house, the money, or anything she thought she was entitled to. I was done. It wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about how far she had gone, how much she had enjoyed playing me for a fool. It was about the fact that she was using my trust and our life together as a playground for her own amusement. I sold the house and moved out. I left everything behind, but I wasn't done yet. Before I walked away for good, I made sure Clara's parents knew the truth. They needed to see their daughter for who she really was. The woman who tore apart a family for a night of thrill-seeking and empty pleasure. I sent them the videos, the ones I had recorded, the ones that would never leave my phone. I made sure they knew what their little girl had been up to when they weren't looking. The last I heard of Clara, she was still with Grace, still partying, still living a life of lies. As for me, I was free. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like myself again. I didn't have to carry the weight of her deceit anymore. I didn't have to wonder if I was being played. I had my life back, and I was going to make the most of it. I'm happy now, happier than I've ever been. And Clara? She's lost everything. The days after filing for divorce felt surreal, like I was walking through a fog, unsure of what came next but relieved that the decision had been made. I had finally broken free from the tangled mess of lies and betrayal. I didn't feel the weight of regret like I thought I would. I should have been devastated, angry, maybe even heartbroken, but instead, I felt a strange sense of clarity. There was no more guessing, no more wondering if something was off, no more waiting for the other shoe to drop. It had all dropped, and now I was standing on the other side, the pieces of my life scattered at my feet. I focused on myself for a change. I started hitting the gym more often. The endorphins helped clear my mind, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was doing something for me. I got back to hobbies I had neglected, things I used to enjoy before life got in the way. I took solo trips to places I had always wanted to visit. New York, a long weekend in the mountains. For once, I wasn't looking over my shoulder, wondering where Clara was or who she was with. It was just me. It felt good. But the divorce wasn't easy. It was messy, far more than I had anticipated. Clara fought me every step of the way. She wasn't about to let go of the life we had built, even though she had burned it to the ground. She begged me to reconsider, tried every trick in the book to get me to come back. "You're making a mistake, Mark," she would say, her voice trembling, her eyes red from crying. "Please, let's just fix this. I'll do anything. I love you." I didn't buy it. Not anymore. The woman who stood before me wasn't the same person I had fallen in love with all those years ago. This Clara, the one who wanted to fix things, was just a shadow of the one I once knew. And I had no intention of wasting any more time on her lies. Her parents tried to intervene too. After I sent them the videos, they were furious, but not with her. They were angry with me for taking the drastic step of exposing her. They didn't understand why I couldn't just move on and forgive her. It was like they were more concerned about keeping up appearances than acknowledging the truth. But I didn't care anymore. The truth was out there. Clara's choices were out in the open. If her parents didn't want to face it, that was their problem. As for Clara, I knew she would never accept responsibility. She was a master at deflecting, at twisting things to make herself look like the victim. She had already moved on, living with Grace, still throwing parties, still pretending that nothing had changed. I wondered how long that would last. I thought I would feel some sort of satisfaction watching her life crumble, but the truth was I didn't care. Not anymore. I wasn't about to let her hold any more power over me. The pain of the betrayal had faded into a dull ache, and the anger had turned into a cold indifference. When the final settlement came through, I walked away with exactly what I wanted, a fresh start. I took a long drive out of town, not sure where I was going at first. I just needed to be somewhere else, somewhere where I could breathe again. The drive gave me time to think about everything. The 8 years with Clara, the good times, the bad, the betrayal that shattered everything. And somewhere along that drive, I realized something. I wasn't just getting away from Clara. I was leaving behind the man I used to be. The one who had let things go on too long. The one who had ignored the signs. I was letting go of that version of myself, too. It was time to move on. I found a small house by the ocean. It was nothing fancy, but it was mine. The sound of the waves crashing against the shore was soothing, and for the first time in months, I felt at peace. I didn't tell anyone I was moving. I didn't need to. It was my time now. There was no drama, no baggage. Just me, the ocean, and a new chapter waiting to be written. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. There would be days when I would still think about Clara, when the memories would come flooding back. But I also knew that I had finally freed myself from the chains of the past. And for the first time in a long time, I was excited about what the future could hold. I was going to make the most of it. The last time I saw Clara, she was sitting at a cafe with Grace, laughing like everything was fine. I didn't feel a thing. No anger. No sadness. Just a quiet acceptance that this was who she had chosen to become. It wasn't my problem anymore. And that was the final step. Letting go. Now it was just me. And I was okay with that. Life went on, as it always does, despite how much we try to stop time or slow down the inevitable. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Slowly, I started rebuilding, not just my life, but my self-worth. There were times when I felt lonely, of course. A moment here or there when I'd catch myself remembering the past, but I would quickly shake it off. I had been free for long enough to realize something important. I was no longer defined by Clara or what happened between us. I still heard about her from mutual friends. She had stopped coming to the events she used to, but I heard whispers about her parties and the life she was living with Grace. The gossip was endless, but I didn't care anymore. Her new life was a mirror of her old one, unraveled, chaotic, and lonely. No amount of socializing, partying, or running away from the truth could change that. But there was a strange sense of finality in knowing that I no longer had to be a part of it. One day, I received an email from an old colleague. It was a business opportunity, something I had thought about pursuing before everything fell apart with Clara. It had been one of the things I had wanted to do, but had put on hold for years, simply because I was too focused on maintaining the life I thought we had. This time, there was no hesitation. I didn't question myself or second guess. I accepted the offer, packed up my things, and moved to the city. The first few months were an adjustment. I had become so accustomed to a life of quiet reflection that the hustle and bustle of city living was a bit overwhelming at first. But there was a freedom in it that I hadn't anticipated. The anonymity was refreshing. I could walk down the street, grab coffee, or attend a meeting without constantly feeling like people were looking at me, wondering what happened. I could be anyone I wanted to be, and it felt like I had been given a second chance. Work kept me busy. I was thriving professionally in ways I hadn't before. The passion I had for my career, once buried under the weight of my personal life, had returned with a vengeance. I was becoming a version of myself I never knew existed, the one who wasn't afraid to take risks, to push limits, to say yes when opportunities arose. One night, after finishing up a presentation, I sat at a bar, reflecting on how far I had come. I ordered a drink, my mind drifting between thoughts of Clara, the mess that had been our life, and how strangely peaceful I felt now. The bartender, a friendly woman in her early 30s, struck up a conversation. We exchanged small talk at first, work, the city, the usual, but something about her made me open up more than I ever expected. It wasn't an earth-shattering connection, but it was enough to remind me that there was more to life than the memories I was trying to escape. She didn't judge me, didn't ask questions about the past, just listened. and that in that moment was enough. We made plans to meet again, and over the next few weeks, we spent more time together. Her name was Eva, and she was smart, funny, and didn't bring up anything about the past. She didn't try to fix me or heal me. She just accepted me. It was a good feeling, one I hadn't realized I was missing. But I wasn't ready for anything serious. Not yet. I still needed time to fully let go of the past and rediscover who I was beyond Clara and everything she had put me through. It was like I was learning how to date again, but this time on my own terms. No expectations, no baggage. As the months went by, I found myself growing closer to Eva. She never pushed, never asked me to be anything other than myself. And with that, I started to open up more about my life, about the pain, the betrayal, and the lessons I had learned. She listened with a kind understanding, never making me feel like I was broken. In those quiet moments, I realized I wasn't afraid to move forward anymore. I wasn't bound by my past. I could breathe, I could laugh, I could love again, if and when I was ready. One evening, as we walked through a park near my apartment, the world seemed to slow down. The lights of the city sparkled in the distance, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. I looked over at Eva, smiling as we talked about everything and nothing. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something real. I realized then that life, for all its unexpected twists, could still surprise me. Clara was behind me now, a chapter closed. I had found my own strength in the ruins of everything that had fallen apart. And now I was ready to live again. I didn't know what the future would hold, but I wasn't afraid. After everything, I had learned the most important lesson of all. I could survive this. I could survive anything. And that, in itself, was enough. The last thing I had to do was let go of the final shred of attachment to Clara, to the memories of us, and let myself truly be free. With Eva, with the city, with myself. For the first time in years, I was finally living on my own terms.